Hi, this is Rick McGill, and today we're going to learn how to make Fromage Blanc, a great cheese for a beginning cheesemaker. It's easy to make, it's tasty, plus you can control the consistency of the cheese. From a spreadable cheese to a more crumbly cheese, it's your call. So come with me and learn how to make this very easy but tasty cheese and add it to your repertoire of homemade cheeses. However, a quick planning note. After a very short initial step, the milk is going to have to sit for 12 to 14 hours to ripen. For that reason, I usually try to start this recipe at night before going to bed, and then I allow the milk to ripen while I'm asleep, so I'm ready for the next step when I wake up in the morning. Here are the ingredients, and they're pretty straightforward. A gallon of milk, a metal pot for heating the milk. You're going to need culture. I use Fromage Blanc culture C20 from cheesemaking.com. I like it because it also contains the rennet. You'll need cheesecloth and string for when you hang the cheese to dry and cure, plus you'll need salt for adding flavor. Later in this video we'll talk about other ways to add flavor in addition to the salt by using pre-made dry dip mixes as well. The first thing you do is heat your milk to 86 degrees Fahrenheit. This should take about 10 to 15 minutes using the lowest setting on your range. Okay, the milk has now reached 86 degrees Fahrenheit. If you're using a raw milk or a non-homogenized milk, you're going to want to do a quick stir just to make sure that you get all of the fat mixed up in the milk. And this is always important because remember the culture we're going to use for the Fromage Blanc has rennet added to it, and you always do a quick stir before adding rennet. After your quick stir, quiet the milk. Try to get it to be nice and calm because you're now going to be adding the rennet, and we don't want to add rennet with the milk moving. Once the milk has been quieted, sprinkle the culture on the top of the milk, and because this is a powdered culture, you're going to let it sit 2 minutes before you do anything with it. Once it is set for 2 minutes, stir the culture into the milk. Now because this culture has rennet in it, you need to do that gently, working low to high to get it all stirred together. Do this for about 30 to 45 seconds to be sure the culture is as thoroughly worked through the milk as possible. Once you're done stirring the milk, cover it and sit it someplace where it will not be disturbed for the next 12 to 14 hours. Okay, it's been about 14 hours, so let's take a look at the cheese. And you'll see the curd is formed nicely, separating a bit from the whey. Now one thing I can tell you is that if you like this cheese, but you'd like a little more flavor in it, a higher intensity of flavor, consider letting the cheese sit for 18 to 24 hours. However, this set of cheese is now set for 14 hours, and it's ready for the next step. To harvest the curd, what you're going to want to do is line a colander with a single ply of cheesecloth. And for reasons that will become apparent pretty soon, you're going to want to make sure that colander will sit in the top of the pot that you use for collecting the whey. You're also going to want a large grill fork, a slotted spoon, and about a foot to foot and a half length of string that you have looped. Using your slotted spoon, you're going to want to ladle your curd into your colander. So set the colander into the sink and begin to ladle the curd. As you see, you just scoop it up like this and put it down in the colander. And you'll do this until all of the curd is removed from the pot. It is important to ladle the curd. You do not pour it into the colander, because if you pour it into the colander, the curd will be broken down. So you continue ladling until all of the curd is removed from your pot. As you ladle the curd into the colander, you might periodically have to just very, very gently break it apart to ensure that the curd fits within the colander. I've just finished ladling all the curd into my colander. And as you can see, just from a single gallon of milk, the curd and some of the residual whey actually fill the entire colander. You're now going to see why you want to have a colander that sits in the top of your pan. Because the next step, we're going to tie the cheesecloth into a ball and hang it so the cheese can begin to drain and cure. So to do this, you're going to want to gather up all of the cheesecloth that you have and get it gathered around to the very top of the colander and lift the colander up and place it right in the top of your pot. Now what you're going to do is take the cheesecloth and pull all of the edges and corners up is you're going to tie this cheesecloth into one large ball for hanging. So here we have it all gathered up like this. And I usually give it, you want to make sure that you have all the sides covered. Give it a good twist up the top a few times to let it rotate around. It helps ensure that you don't have any loose ends. You're going to take your string that you've already looped and use that around the base. And using the loop, you're going to pull one end through, tighten it, and then just tie a very, very simple knot. Now, one of the things that you're supposed to do is to let this hang for 3 to 8 hours. And while it hangs, the whey is going to continue to drip out of it. The problem is finding a convenient place to hang it. When I first started doing this, I'd try hanging it on the faucet, hanging it in other areas, and invariably it would either slip off or somebody would bump it or something would happen. But I came up with a pretty effective way of hanging it using my grilling fork. What you do is take your cloth, the cheesecloth, and there's usually a little bit of a ponytail like this on it, and you merely wrap it around your meat hook. Take your collar out, slide the fork prongs into the handle, and you automatically have a way to hang your cheese, and the pot will gather the whey as it drains off. So now what you do is you let this sit anywhere from 3 to 8 hours. At the 3-hour point is what I like. You have a more spreadable, softer cheese. If you let it sit 8 hours or more, it will be a fairly crumbly cheese, but it's really your determination based upon what you want the cheese to do and what you prefer. So I've now moved the pot and the cheese ball to a quiet corner of my stove where I will let it stand for 3 hours draining. And at that point, I will add salt and herbs in it to flavor it. Remember, I'm hanging the cheese for 3 hours because I want a more spreadable cheese. If you'd like something drier that probably crumbles a bit more, you would hang the cheese longer. One of the things you will want to play with is how long to hang the cheese so that you can get the texture and consistency that you desire. Okay, the cheese is hung for 3 hours, so now it's time to flavor it. There are lots of options open to you. Just remember that you always want to use dry elements in flavoring your cheese. Personally, I prefer to use cheese salt and a series of gourmet dip mix, Sherry's Gourmet Dips. I've chosen this dip mix because it doesn't have salt in it, and also 1 packet of dip mix is the perfect amount for flavoring the cheese that I make from 1 gallon of milk. I've also found that this supplier has a very wide variety of dip flavors and has allowed me to have a lot of variety in the cheese I make. Today we're going to make hot and spicy garlic, but in the past I've made lime cilantro, roasted red pepper and garlic, regular garlic, spinach, veggie, a whole sort of different cheeses. Find a supplier that you like, and using dip mix can be a very effective way for flavoring this cheese. Okay, the cheese has now hung for close to 3 hours, so it's time to do the final step. In this step, we're going to flavor the cheese by adding some cheese salt and also some herbs. What you need to do is merely remove the cheese out of the cheesecloth. You cut the cloth off, roll the cheese out. You want to be sure that you get all of the little particles of cheese because that's yield that you might be missing if you don't get that off the cheesecloth. And then what you're going to do is you're going to add 2 teaspoons of cheese salt. Now, if you like it saltier, you can add a little bit more. If you don't like it as salty, add less, but I typically do 2 teaspoons. And then I add my dip mix. Now, in this situation, I'm going to add Sherry's Gourmet Dip Mix, and I'm going to add the hot and spicy garlic. We have a lot of varieties of dip mix from Sherry's, but I like this because it is a non-salt mix. So that way I can control the salt through the amount I add specifically to the cheese. All you're going to do is incorporate this into your cheese, And then once you do that, you're done. So to add the dip mix, I'm going to merely sprinkle that over the cheese here. And I'll get a fork. And I will begin to just work it and the salt into the cheese. So you just continue this until it gets all worked through. Then what you do is you cover it, put it in the refrigerator, and I like to let it sit for at least 12 hours prior to serving. I want to give that salt and the spices plenty of time to work their way through. And as you're mixing it, just be sure you're mixing way down deep so that you get all of the cheese from your mass work through here. And I won't continue stirring here just because it gets a little boring at times. But you basically cover that, put it in the refrigerator, and in 12 hours it's time for you to make some cheese, or to have some cheese. And in total, if I weigh this, this will weigh close to 2 pounds. So basically, as you look at the cost of making this cheese, it cost me about $5 for my milk, about $4 to $5 for the Sherry's dip mix, and then hardly anything, probably about $1 total for everything else, including the culture and the salt. So basically, you can make a really tasty cheese for about $5 to $6 a pound. This cheese will last in your refrigerator anywhere from 3 to 4 weeks. So enjoy.